Hey, you've got this part of the video. You've got the live unedited edition. Home Gadget Geeks Thursday night, the let's see, 21st of September. I think it's what that is. 8 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you got it any other time in that, you've got the recorded version, and that's okay. Just hang tight. If you're listening live, jump in the chat room. Love to have you there, and the sounds of Christian typing away are always comforting and reminiscent of a previous day. Christian, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jim. It's good to be on. It's a nice way to like coast into Friday, you know. Good night to podcast. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's always worked out. 585 of these plus whatever we did on Cyber Frontiers plus whatever.
Yeah.
Many a Saturdays. Oh, John made it. Good to see you, John. Whatever. Yeah, there he is. Yeah, no, it's kind of fun. We tomorrow got the air conditioning guys are coming. The HVAC guys are coming to replace my 25-year-old air conditioner. So that will be on its way out. Fortunately, we're replacing it before it goes bad, so that it's not one of those middle of the summer, like tomorrow's supposed to be, like 75. So we're that's my day tomorrow. Be here working, but helping these guys move stuff around, get stuff done. Kind of nice way to slide into the weekend, So
yeah, right on.
John's asking where Tony is. You're the same person, so I don't know why you're asking where you are. Joe checking in. Thanks for coming out. I saw KVJ a little bit earlier. Randy Black is out there. He said, go home, Gadget Geeks. We got some stuff to catch up on. Christian has been busy.
Busy. Always busy.
Always busy.
Rule number 1, be busy. Life's too short to not be busy.
I've carved out some time on my calendar just to be available for people, like at work and stuff like that. It's turning out to be a pretty good strategy too. I'm not saying being busy is a bad, because there's times you got to be heads down, grinding. You just have to do it. The first 6 months of the year were that way for me. But it's been kind of nice just to be available. Somebody's like, "Hey," and I'm like, "I can help you do that." And they're like, "Really?" Yeah. Get some cachet for maybe future things.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways.
Yeah.
All right. Let's kick this thing off. Let's do this thing. Ooh, watch that glass.
Sorry, let me switch to a soft pad here. Just give me a second to move my
watch that glass.
My stuff. All right. You didn't hear it that time.
Yeah, no worries. That dong.
Jim's favorite noise over the years.
It just drives me crazy. All right, here we go. This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks show number 585 with guest Christian Johnson, recorded on September 21st, 2023. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. Spring is on its way. Woohoo! No, what am I saying? Fall is on its way. Spring in Australia, maybe. Of course, we post a show with some world-class show notes. I have no idea where my mind is tonight. Out at the AverageGuy.tv. Big thanks to Paul Braren, who joined us last week. He's always good. He's a fan favorite, and everybody loves to have Paul on. Paul did a great job. Paul, thanks for jumping in here. He's had quite a busy last 18 months. And if you haven't caught it yet, Home Gadget Geeks 584. Get that checked out today. Big thanks to our Patreon subscribers as well. If you're finding value in the podcast and you want to give back, you want to join that helps us kind of do some stuff around here. TheAverageGuy.tv/Patreon will get you there as well. Christian is back. And Christian, always great to have you on Home Gadget Geeks. And thanks for letting me just fold Cyber Frontiers into Home Gadget Geeks. Slotty's here.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
No, right on. Good to be back. Always glad that the remnants of Christian's Corner and or Cyber Frontiers and or the other esoteric topics that I like to get into still have a home here. So it's good to
yeah. Well, and tonight I think we're gonna cover all of those things. So it's kind of reminiscent of the old home tech days when you're on, and some Cyber Frontiers before that. But always good to have you back. Okay, a major event happened in your life between last show and this show. You, and I don't even know how to say it, you got your pilot's license or something. You alluded to that, I think we talked, but you got it. Talk a little bit about that experience. Update us.
Yeah, right on. It's been a great adventure. I completed my student solo in mid-August, which is essentially the first time that you are out there on your own. The actual student solo is fairly simple, though, in a sense. It's 3 takeoff and landings in the pattern, and that kind of makes you current for the license that you hold. So the actual flying part of your first student solo is fairly straightforward. But then, once you have that and you're properly endorsed in your logbook, that allows you to be exercising the privileges of a student pilot, which pretty much means you can fly by yourself, but you can't carry passengers yet. And so since then, I've been working both my student solo hours as well as working what's called the cross-country legs that have to be done as part of the full private pilot license. And so that's flying. Cross-country sounds really impressive big, but really it's just a minimum of 50 nautical miles between 2 different airports. So I've actually done 2 70 nautical mile trip practices with my instructor, one to Lancaster and one to Harrisburg. Really cool approaches, especially the Harrisburg approach, because as you approach Harrisburg, you have 3 Mile Island on the right-hand side where the nuclear kind of event took place in the 80s. That there's a really good documentary on Netflix, if you haven't caught it, that kind of goes into that whole craze. But then as you cut left away from the nuclear plant, if it's a clear sunny day, you just get this beautiful overlook onto the Susquehanna. You got the Harrisburg city skyline right there. You're coming right into the airport, and the main runway is about maybe 12 feet from the river. And so it's really cool. Towered Airport, I would say it's like a small terminal version of BWI. So it's a true regional airport. And within like 20 or 30 seconds of landing, Boeing 737 from Allegiant came in right behind me. So it's been a really great experience. It's been a hobby that the best way I can describe it is you can do a lot of hobbies in life where you might be going through the motions of doing that hobby, but your brain might be elsewhere. And for me, it's really easy to be thinking about work while I'm still doing something else. But if you're thinking about work while flying an airplane, it's probably not going to go too well for you. You're probably not going to be up there very long. So it's been a really great hobby in the sense that totally out of my element, learning how to fly, didn't have any background, didn't know anyone that was previously a pilot, just kind of jumped into a whole new world cold. And I thought one of the fun things to do, not because I think this is like average tech or average gadgets that people are going to be going out and buying, but I thought it'd be kind of fun to walk through some of the gadgets that have made my piloting journey so far successful, just because I think it's a cool testament to how much technology is also impacting general aviation. And I'm not really talking about your, ATP airline captains and your big, United, Southwest, et cetera. But I am talking about the people that are doing recreational private pilot flying, instrument rated flying, et cetera, and how they're leveraging everyday gadgets to replace things that were very manual if you were learning how to be a private pilot, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it is a cool technology space in and of itself, as well as a lot of cool practical skills that come out of having to learn how to fly.
Yeah, I remember flying Omaha to Centennial in Denver. The airport there, I was going out to do some speaking. A buddy, I said, I was telling him I was going out there, and he said, well, I could fly you out there. And I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. So he flew me out there. That's the last time I'm ever getting in a small aircraft like that again. It scared the daylights out of me. Like I just was not and I know. Listen,
What kind
I
of
know
aircraft was it? Do you
it's
remember? Yeah.
Cessna 4-seater. So pretty not slow, but not fast. And then it rode you could feel every bump.
Oh yeah.
And that was unsettling to me. And then on the way back, he was like, "Well, I'm not rated to do equipment landing, and Omaha's fogged in, so we're gonna have to wait." So he spent the night in Centennial. What are you gonna do, right? Your aircraft is there. So, well, congrats on getting that. It's a big deal, and you've got some things to. I mean, you still got some things to go until you can take passengers, right, and some of that stuff. So,
Yeah, so I'll be doing what's called a stage 2 check in October, and that's essentially making sure all your navigation skills and some of the later stage maneuvers like short and soft field takeoff and landings are all looking good. Making sure your radio navigation is solid. And that pretty much gives you the green light to then get the endorsements in your logbook to repeat your cross countries solo. And that's really the last major solo activity before you can take the final check ride with the FAA. So I'll get those 2 knocked out here in the fall, and I have one nighttime flight left to finish, and then I'm good for the check ride. So nighttime flight's actually misunderstood because a lot of people assume that you need to be instrument rated to fly at night, but you can fly at night under VFR rules and conditions. So you're not required.
Meaning you can see everything visual. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's no obstructions.
Right. And so, that is a privilege you can exercise as well as a private pilot. And there's daytime currency and nighttime currency as a VFR pilot. But yeah, you can fly as long as you're within those currency regulations. And so I'm kind of hoping by December we can complete the check ride for the full
Cool.
private pilot license. And then in parallel to that, depending on how long it takes to get the check ride scheduled, I'll be starting my instrument training in parallel.
Nice.
So we're just going to keep on going
Cool.
through.
Cool. Yeah, good work. John wanted to know if you in Harrisburg there, if you took off over the river.
Yeah, absolutely. We came in on approach on runway 31, and then when you take off, it's right back over the Susquehanna, heading back towards Maryland. So it's a really cool both approach and departure.
Cool. Brian checking in with a congratulations, and then he wants to know what plane are you flying?
Everything I'm flying right now is a Cessna 172. I normally fly the M model, which is a 1975-76 aircraft. Pretty old school stuff. That still is a like manual carburetor heat, and you're controlling priming the fuel, etc. I've also flown the S model, which is much newer. Those have this particular one has the full Garmin 1000 NXP avionics panels. It has autopilot. It is a much newer aircraft, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. And it is fuel injected. So the start sequence is a bit different, but newer spec for sure. So even within, when someone says a 172, that can mean a lot of different things based on what letter is at the end of that statement. But really, most of the fleets that you'll see in the greater DC area, M model is probably going to be on the oldest side, and most of them are, you'll see M, N, R, P, S are pretty common for trainer aircraft in a Cessna 172. And then moving into next year, we're looking at a couple options. One would be to upgrade to a 182T, which is a turbocharged. It's much larger on the inside. You're going to get much better cruise performance, has much greater carrying capacity, easy to maintain, well-known aircraft. It's basically the 172, but bigger, better, etc. Other thing that there's discussion. I've started a small group of co-pilots who are interested in potentially doing things together long-term, who are either have their private pilots or starting to work on their instrument. So all kind of in a similar place on the training. and also looking at Cirrus, which has become the most popular general aviation brand and took that title from Cessna when they created the first Cirrus G1 back in '99, I think was when the first one was out, maybe a little earlier. But they are through 6 different generations of Cirrus at this point, and they have 2 models. They have a SR20 and a SR22, and then they also have a turbocharged version of the SR22, and those things are blazing fast. So like for comparison, a 172M, you're lucky at max cruise performance. If you get a good headwind, maybe you're doing 120 knots. In a Cirrus SR22, you can do anywhere from 200 to 220 knots. So it's about double in terms of what you're going to do for personal travel, and it's all full glass, much newer aircraft, composite material, composite paint, much newer, just newer everything pretty much from Cessna. And Cessna took a stab at trying to be like Cirrus. They released they created an aircraft called the Cessna TTX in about 2014, and it didn't take off, I think, the way they had hoped. And so you can find them on the market, and they have retained their value, but really in terms of who is selling the most new airframes right now, I mean, Cirrus walks away with it. One of the things that Cirrus is best known for, or was kind of uniquely invented, was the CAPS system, which is, literally, if you're in trouble, you can pull a double safety handlebar overhead, and a parachute is going to bring the whole aircraft down to the ground safely. So it's a parachute system for the airplane. They very tightly pack and compress that parachute into the plane. The only maintenance required is every 10 years they have what's called a CAPS repack, where they repack the parachute and make sure everything is in working order. And so, that is one of the areas that I think people really got captivated by Cirrus when it first came out, but they've made major substantive improvements in each subsequent generation. And what's also impressive is that for the speed the aircraft gets, it's a fixed landing gear aircraft, so you can't retract the landing gear to get more airspeed. So it's impressive that, really it is I would argue it's the fastest single piston aircraft that is in that 4-seater size that doesn't have a retractable landing gear, and is a very high-tech kind of way to do aviation. It is a low wing aircraft. I have loved flying high wing, to be honest, really, because just the view angle is really awesome. There's obviously that's easily addressed by, tilt your nose, change your heading a little bit. You'll get the angle you want to get. But I've really enjoyed flying the high wings. It's a very cool experience, but Cirrus has definitely become a very popular aircraft. And I think one of the things that people really are surprised to hear about, who are not, living general aviation on a regular basis, is just how long these airframes last. And that's one of the leading reasons why you can fly a plane that's 50 or 60 years old. And, people might think like, gee, like I'm not driving a car that's 50 or 60 years old. Why am I getting in an airplane that's 50 or 60 years old? And like, so it's a little bit unsettling at first, but you kind of learn and realize that the airframes are rated for just incredible number of hours. So like a Cessna 172 airframe is rated for, I think, up to like 12,000 hours of flight.
Yep.
And the engines are rebuilt in their entirety. Every single piece is taken apart and put back together as part of the maintenance requirements about every 2,000 hours. So in a way, the airframes are retaining their value long term. And if you're taking care of the furnishings, the paint job, etc., it's amazing how much you can upgrade these planes in terms of their avionics and their instrumentation. So, really, like I have a partial glass display in that 172M. You wouldn't have had that if you were flying it back in 1976, but it's a bit of a different aircraft when you're flying it with those types of instruments.
Well, they're common enough too that they can make upgrades to them that people are going to buy and then install,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Right. And so, one thing that's been really interesting to see is just how these, much older aircraft have retained their value, and they're going up in value, and flight schools are competing for them on the open market to try and grab up as many of them as they can, because they're not being produced in the quantities that used to be produced in. And some might argue that there's a lot more value in learning how to fly in a Cessna first before learning how to fly something like a Cirrus. It's a bit of a different way to start out flying. And so Cirrus actually has a Cirrus transition program. It's only about 10 hours of training, but the idea is to kind of accustom you to the differences flying between a traditional aircraft like a Piper or a Cessna and the Cirrus, especially because, like one of the big control differences is the Cirrus is much more like a joystick. You're literally controlling a joystick on the pilot side, whereas, a Cessna or a Piper is traditional yoke control. So, yeah, some nuances there that would be interesting to start flying. There's plenty of pilots that do. They start right from the beginning on Cirrus, but I have really enjoyed flying. Like, gee, this is what they were flying 56 years ago. This is still what they're flying and training in today. And then here are all the ways that we've retrofitted these planes or retrofitted training or understanding to make these planes more fun, more safe to fly even today. And so, like the plane I fly, I think has total engine time around 4,600 hours. And yeah, that means they're going to be able to rebuild it. And it's made it 60 years and probably could be rebuilt another 4 or 5 times before they're like, okay, we really got to put this thing in the trash. It's done, which is just unbelievable.
Well,
When
the
you think about it.
airspeed doesn't put as much stress on the body because it's pretty low airspeed, right, for the most part. And so,
Yeah.
right,
Well, yes. I mean, one of the important things, though, is there are, of course, dumb ways you can make that airspeed
oh,
be higher
true,
than what it should. So,
true,
like, if you're staying below maneuvering speed and you're not
yeah,
like trying to pull G's or
right,
donuts in the
right,
sky or
yeah,
spin it out of control, like it's like a car, right? Like you could take a junker and beat the heck out of it and make it go probably way faster than it should. Similar things with a plane. However, yeah, generally
yeah,
speaking,
yeah.
you're not going to see the same types of load factors on a 172 trainer that you're going to see on either larger or faster aircrafts.
Yeah. I mean, if you took a 74, a vehicle built in 74 and you treated it like they treat their aircraft, keep them indoors, keep them clean, rebuild the engine from time to time,
Yeah.
right? Do all those maintenance things. It would probably last just as long, right? I mean, it's cool. You mentioned some gadgets. Let's talk or some things from a technology perspective. What else? You mentioned a few, but have you bought anything for this that you've been using?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you realize with aviation is that it's a burning a hole in your wallet exercise like you wouldn't believe. But it's you just go to bed smiling every night how much fun you had. So, you just try not to think about that part. Um, but I think I mentioned this maybe on the last post show on Home Gadget Geeks. I don't know if it caught the recorded edition or not, but um, one of the big personal challenges that I've been able to overcome in learning how to fly has been motion sickness. I've just been historically always very prone to motion sickness. Put me on a spinny ride or put me out to sea, and I'm like dead. Um, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised the first time I got up in the sky, and it was not much better of an experience. And when you're motion sick, it's not like you're there's a difference between motion sickness, the type of reaction you have with motion sickness, and the type of reaction you have in like, oh, I'm ill, like I caught a bug and I'm vomiting, right? There's definitely an anxiety response that happens. Your brain is pretty out of it when you get deeply motion sick, and you just physically feel like I'm done. Um, and That's obviously pretty distracting when you're like trying to learn how to fly. So I wasn't sure how I was going to get through it at first. And yeah, I did a fair amount of research on this, that, and the other thing. And so, some of the common things that people will tell you are like, well, have you looked at these, FDA approved medications? But like, you have to be really careful. Number one, because there's a very of those list of medications, there's very few that are going to be approved by the FAA if you're going to be a pilot. And then number two, like I didn't like the thought of having to be dependent on something to be in the sky as a pilot safe. So I thought about this for a while and I thought, well, exposure therapy doesn't sound like the most, enticing thing in the world, but let's give it a try. So, we would go up there on both calm days and brutal days. I mean, we're talking like north of 20 knots, which doesn't sound like a big deal. But if you're motion sick, it feels like you're on the worst ride of your life at Disney World, especially when you're doing a landing approach and you feel like the aircraft's going like this and you have your horizon it doesn't matter how many times someone tells you to stare at their horizon, like it just isn't working for you. And so one of the first big changes I made, which maybe is obvious for some, but is very similar to what they tell you if you get seasick, is focus on eating and drinking a ton before you get in that plane or on that boat.
That seems so counterintuitive.
And it seems really counterintuitive,
Yeah.
especially because for the first while, all I would do is throw up, have a good breakfast, stay really hydrated, go out early in the morning when it's still cool. But I would say that actually delayed getting motion sick by a bit. Not like anything that was going to be game changer, but it bought me a little bit more time in the sky. Then I started realizing like, gee, I need to come better prepared to lose the entire inner contents of my body. So I would start bringing boxes of Ziplocs in my airbag or in my, my go bag basically for flying. And only like one bag and I was done, we turned back. And so I was like, I have to figure out how can I get more exposure without having to, turn back and go in, but push through it. So two things. One, breathing makes a huge difference. How you're controlling your breathing during that kind of anxiety climb to the motion sickness and even after can play a big role in how long it takes you to kind of go through a cycle of motion sickness. And that's not something that people really tell you to focus on. But it was something I noticed, is that when I could catch deeper breaths for more concentrated periods of time, I could defer some of the worst side effects of motion sick. But again, none of this stuff I'm talking about. I mean, most people would hear me come back talking about this stuff and think this dude's like actually, batshit crazy at this point. Like I would never do this. So I was like, okay, like what's a real aid that I can deploy that is not a drug, is not, anything mental that can help me work through this. And so this was a very long introduction to the first gadget. But the first gadget is this really cool little watch looking widget. And it's called the Reliefband. And it has, it's a very simple interface, has a power button on the front, has 5 different light indicator and power modes from 1 to 5. And on the back of the device, you have 2 basically electro stimulating pads. And what it just comes in a simple pouch. And what comes with the device is this basically hypoallergenic gel. And so the way it works is inside the gadget, if I were to open this compartment and pull this up tab out, you can see it's 2 CR2032 batteries that powers the device. And what it does is it actually sends a continuous pulse of electroactivity through the device. And it's, not too dissimilar from shocking your dog, except it's a little bit of a different modulation we're going for here. And you use this gel and you actually position it on your wrist, and you're looking to place it in these 2 kind of main nerve veins that are going up your arm. And the electric signal is actually going to go up your arm into your brain neurologically, and then traveled down to your stomach. And what it actually is doing is it's stimulating your vagus nerve. And so it's calming this kind of, if you think of your stomach as having these unstable waves, it's calming that type of behavior and that type of signaling in your body. And so this is a non-drug approach to trying to get some motion sickness relief, which it was very interesting to find out that a lot of pilots, like when they're first starting out, this is, not an uncommon issue for a lot of folks. But of all the people that my flight instructor has had quit because of motion sickness, none of them he had never heard about this device. He had never tried it, etc. And it really is for all types of motion sickness. It's not really just for, hey, I'm going to be up in a plane. It's for boats. It's for amusement rides, etc. And so the FDA has rated and approved the device. It has an 85% effectiveness in the studies, in the clinical studies, of having some amount of relief for motion sickness. So I was like, okay, it's about $150 on Amazon. I was like, well, at $165 an hour of flying this thing in the sky, I may as well see if I can, turn that 1 hour into 2 hours. So seems like a pretty decent investment. And what was fascinating about it is that starting out, it didn't stop the motion sickness, which was, at first it was a bummer. But what I realized was I felt great after like 30 seconds. And I was like, wow, like that's a game changer. And usually,
after vomiting, you felt
after like a full vomit, full experience, like, oh, that was awful. And then 30 seconds, I was like, oh, I feel fine again. Let's go. And I just like, that was such a breakthrough moment that this gadget got me to. It really allowed my idea of exposure therapy to take off. So then, I mean, at some of the peaks of the exposure therapy, I'm talking flights where like 4 or 5 different bags had to be deployed. And, people are completely grossed out and like, dude, you're insane at this point. But like that device got me through the motion sickness. And because it has those different power intensity levels, as I was progressing through my training, right, my end goal is I don't want to be dependent on anything to be able to fly, not even a relief band. So I would slowly start backing down the power increments as I was getting less and less motion sick over time, to the point where I just stopped wearing the wristband altogether. And somewhere around, as a student pilot right now, I've done 113 landings and I've done 61.3 flight hours. And I would say somewhere around the 20 to 25 hour mark, it was like that switch finally flipped in my brain, where didn't matter what the wind speed was, didn't matter what the conditions were, didn't matter what angle of the horizon was, like it was gone. And so I haven't worn that relief band in over 40 hours of flying. And that motion sickness is just, it's not something I even think about anymore, which would have been a kind of a quick end to the whole hobby if this type of gadget didn't exist. So I love telling people about it who, they might not be going on a plane anytime soon, but like there's a lot of other situations and a lot of other people who experience motion sickness where this type of gadget might be key. So I really just thought that this was awesome. And they come in some different styles and some different contours. That looks like one of the higher end ones.
Yeah, that was the $279. I mean, the highest price on these things is less than $300. I mean, I pay more for an Apple Watch than these, right? This is the sport version of it we're showing on screen for $250. I mean, in your experience, here's the Flex for $179. Yep. And then they've got the classic, what they call the classic. That's, I think,
that's what I have as the classic
for $150. I looked up this vagus nerve because I hadn't heard it before, and it said the vagus nerve is involved in regulating important body functions, including breathing, heart rate, digestion, and immune response. It also plays an important role in controlling mood, emotions, and social behavior. Did you see any positive side effects beyond, helping you? And maybe this was part of getting through it, but did you sense any of those other benefits of it as you were wearing it as well in those areas?
I think it's certainly mood, not particularly. I mean, my mood was very focused on trying to fly the aircraft, trying to control the response. But I would say I wouldn't be surprised if it helped quite a bit with the actual that it's like the anxiety climax drop off phase of the
Yeah,
motion
yeah,
sickness. And
yeah,
so if that's kind of the contour in which they mean mood, I think absolutely, because that is a big part in what holds you back from feeling like you can go through that experience again. Um, Social behavior, not so much. Emotions, not so much. Definitely, though, the breathing and the ability to handle the kind of that stomach response.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. They
Yeah.
they say in this article here, and I'll have all these links in the show notes if you want to go out and look at them. But it says the vagus nerve is sometimes called the wandering nerve because of many of the different parts of the body it interacts with. Stimulating vagus nerve can also have calming effects on the body, which I think is what
Yeah.
you were looking for, right? That recovery because you were going into it while it was still happening. You were going into it. Man, I think about for folks who, in boating or in, maybe any of those situations where that's debilitating.
Yeah.
This could be, this could be one of those things. And so how long did you use the watch? You're off of it now, right? At this
Yeah.
point, you're not using. Would you consider bringing it back for any reason at some point, or you're good, you feel like you're good at this point?
I mean, unless I was like in hurricane conditions out at sea and felt like, gee, this might be a good thing to have just in
Yeah.
case, like
Yeah.
maybe. But I
Yeah.
mean, my goal with it was to not have it become a crutch where, oh, I'm only going to be in the plane if this thing is zapping my arm. But I keep it in the flight bag as like an honorary, like it's there. It's pretty small to stow. So like there's no harm in having it and keeping it. Um, But no, I mean, for me personally, like I said, it was about 20 to 25 hours of use of flight time of the 61 hours that I've logged. So about a third of my journey. And if I were to put out on like a chart, because my pilot journey has been around November 16th of last year was my first flight. And I did a couple flights in November and December. The first kind of experiences with motion sickness were a bit enough for me. So work and other stuff was pretty busy. And that on top, I was kind of thinking about, okay, what's my next move here? So I took January, February, and most of March off. And then in the last week of March, I got back into it and had the Reliefband. And, you can plot out like what was my kind of productivity or advancement against the hours that I was doing in the logbook. And you can see just how much the Reliefband accelerated that. So even though I've been flying for almost a year in November, really my core training to get where I've gotten today has been 6 months of very focused 2 times a week. I'm out there flying, I'm working with the instructor, I'm doing ground instruction at home, etc. And that definitely wouldn't have been possible without the Reliefband, but definitely for a good third of that journey, it was the way that I was able to get to that 6 months of really core focus in doing the pilot training.
Yeah. No, that sounds cool. I wonder if you could compare that to your do you get any watch data? Are you wearing any watch that's doing any kind of health thing
I'm
for you?
not. It's funny. My wife wears the Apple Watch every day and loves it and has all the health data. And I guess I'm an old fart in that respect. I
No, no,
just don't have
it,
one.
it would be interesting to correlate, to have the relief band on one side and the Apple Watch on the other, or whatever. There's a variety. Apple's not the only one in this space. But to kind of see what kind of health conditions
Yeah,
that would bring, maybe even, I mean, you got me kind of thinking on this thing now. It's kind of
yeah,
cool from like even from just a regular wear on a regular basis of, or yeah, sleeping with it. I wonder what that, if that, maybe for some it would keep them awake, right? Because obviously, do you feel it? Do you feel the physical stimulation as it's happening?
On the higher
See?
power settings, definitely. It's, if it's on like full power setting, it might even be a little uncomfortable depending on your weight, how tightly
Yeah.
you have it installed, how much
Yeah.
gel you have, etc. But certainly on a low power setting, it, after a while you would forget it's there.
Hmm. Yeah. I just think of maybe for individuals who have, and sometimes I have a tendency, I'll mess with I'll pinch my fingers in a response to just, it's if I'm agitated or if I'm stressed, I kind of, and that's a obvious pain response. I'm doing that to stimulate something on my body, wondering if this could be one of those devices for stress, where you might, if you're feeling stressed, that may be one of those things with something like this and a little meditation practice or something along those lines. I
Yeah.
don't know. Sounds interesting.
Yeah. No,
Sounds
right on. But it was a cool
yeah.
gadget to introduce, only because I just feel that a lot of people, even in my own life, didn't know about it, and it
Yeah.
certainly has a lot of applications outside of
No, right
flying.
on,
So
right on. Well, and you've got a story. Like, I mean, just think, you filling
yeah,
bags to not at this point.
yeah, yeah. I think
Brian,
John asked earlier if the CFI charged extra for that service, and he's been very kind and patient, and
zip it up and put it back in the bag. Oh, cool. Um, just can't imagine. Brian says, figure if you buy meds for nausea enough, buying this device would pay for itself. And to your point, I mean, man, if you can have a mechanical device that would help you overcome that,
yeah.
as opposed to drugs, right?
I mean, for me, the drugs was really like it was a red line for me. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe if I really got beat down that like nothing else is working, I would try one of the FAA approved drugs just to see if that would be enough to jumpstart me. But um, it's really so awesome that, yeah, you don't have to ingest anything in your body to get the benefits. It's like there's really not many things out there that can do that for you. So
Yeah. A little bit of gel, put it
yeah.
on, set the dial it in. I'm assuming those numbers
Yep.
are what
1 through 5, yeah, the
yeah.
power level.
And how does it charge? Is it's got the batteries? Is that what you were showing earlier? Is it
Yeah, so there's
yeah.
different models. So the higher end models have like a USB-C charger, and the base model, like the one that I have, is just two CR2032 batteries. So once they're done, you're replacing them much like you would replace a CR2032 battery in your watch.
How long do they last generally for you?
It's
I know it
interesting.
depends on use, right?
Mine
But
did not last as long as I think, and I wonder if I had accidentally left it on after one of the trainings. So that's something that's kind of easy to do, because they say it should last, for dozens of hours. But yeah, you can see the Sport is the USB rechargeable model, the Premier and the Sport, and then the other two are battery replaceable. And you can see, yeah, the rating on the Flex, which would be pretty comparable. They're saying 350 hours. I definitely did not make it to even a third of that. So even if you want to say the Classic is half as good as the Flex, I did not make it to 150 hours.
yeah.
So I think I must have left it on accidentally one day. So
Yeah. No, that's cool. Well, it looks like the Flex is the upgraded Classic, and then
yes.
they've added Sport and Premier to it. So cool. Well, no, that's a very cool gadget. I didn't
Yeah.
anticipate.
Yeah.
You're like, huh, I have to keep that. Well, especially for people that struggle with motion sickness, and it's awful. I mean, it
No,
was
right
just
on.
it was just awful. So very cool. Well, let's transition a little bit into maybe something not so cool, and we'll do a little cyber frontiers segment here as we think about the world of what's going on at MGM right now and kind of the madness. For those who don't know, give us a little synopsis and then maybe a little commentary. What's happening in MGM?
Yeah, it's funny because we were out for our annual haunt at DEF CON this year, and my experience checking into an MGM owned property was, interestingly, within like 20 minutes of being there, their automated kiosk systems were not working. So you would go to check in, it would scan your driver's license, it would find who you were, and then the system was just like lost. And so we managed to get there earlier enough that like we were able to get a person before the line like out across the casino started forming. But I was like, huh, DEF CON's starting early this year. If, we've already arrived and automatic check-in isn't working. But yeah, within a month, this article kind of comes into the full fore, where Really, all the classic things that we've talked about so many times on Cyber Frontiers, right? Okta was the identity management vendor for MGM Resorts, and so they were running a lot of key systems that run the casino network, the hotel reservation network, like pretty much core business functions of this company. And this all started with basically very poor reporting in American media, in the sense that um, this was happening for several days and no one was covering it. And it was like, it blew my mind how hush hush all this was. But essentially, classic story of a sophisticated phishing campaign, social engineering, working the phones. They were able to compromise MFA related credentials for super administrators, move laterally through the system. And I haven't had a chance to study the full amount of information that is out there, but what some of the initial reporting is saying is that, there was lateral movement in their systems in ways that were novel, that weren't just your traditional, once they got the foothold, what came next was not traditional at all. And what's really fascinating about it is that if you've ever been to Vegas, most of the properties on the strip now are pretty much owned by one of two major companies, MGM Resorts or Caesar Forum. So if it's not Caesar, it's not MGM. I'm not saying there aren't other big names on the strip, but they own a lot of the real estate on the strip. And Caesars got hit with this kind of same thing several weeks prior to MGM, and no one heard about it. It wasn't reported at all. And why? As we come to find out only after the fact, Caesar is like, this is above our pay grade. We're paying these guys off because we're not dealing with this. So they paid off the ransomware and they walked, I don't want to say scot-free, but clearly whatever amount they paid is much less than the 8.7 million estimated per day that MGM has been losing in trying to deal with this. So MGM was like, we're not negotiating with the hackers. So their response was to shut down all of their systems. And I mean, pretty much all of their systems, which meant you were only playing in the casinos on machines that took cash. No one was booking in or doing online reservations. So, I mean, pretty crippling for a resort and entertainment industry like MGM. And so it's still just, my commentary is pretty simple on this one. It still amazes me how effective phishing is, and really the social engineering piece. And I kind of remember every year, at least every 2 or 3 years, we try to go to the social engineering village at DEF CON, and they go into the soundproof phone booth and they call a random company and they see how far they can get. And it's just, you sit there and you're so impressed how many people, it's just like I don't know, it's like almost an automated natural response for people to want to provide information for a variety of different social pressure points that adversary can apply, right? Sometimes it can be, job related stress of like, I'm going to escalate this to your supervisor. So it can be that type of like veiled threat. Other times it can be just, I'm a harmless, nice guy. I'm looking for information. I'm running a survey for your company. I mean, the quantities and different types of ways that people get creative and really hacking human social capabilities, for lack of a better phrase, is pretty unbelievable. And if you're good at it, there seems to be ample amounts of 0-day ammunition in the toolkit for attackers to leverage once they get that initial foothold. So pretty impressive, pretty surprising, fascinating how long it took the media to care about covering it. This was a 10-day outage for MGM. So about 80 to 90 million of lost, I don't know if that's revenue or profit, but I mean, just insane. So I thought this was a very splashy, not really a data breach in the kind of the classic sense. maybe there is data that's been stolen that we don't even know about yet that would make it more of a data breach. I don't think we really have that
I mean, if
information.
they had that kind of lateral access. Like,
Yes.
what got downloaded?
Yeah.
Everything, probably. Right. Right.
Absolutely. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think that it's fascinating that we still have headlines in the space that ransomware, we see so many different enterprise products around ransomware. This, you buy an AV product even for the home, and it talks about all the ways it's going to protect ransomware, but yet here we are, and it's still very
Yeah.
effective
Yeah.
at major institutions. So
Well, it's not going to stop ransomware if you ignore it. Like, that's the thing. Like, you install this stuff maybe locally, and then it tries to. The other night, a few warnings popped up for me, and I'm like, okay, I click them off, and then I'm like, wait a minute, whoa. Let's open that back up. I should probably go through and see what those warnings are. And so the human, we become the weak link on. Is there? I mean, we haven't talked about this in a while, a year or two maybe. Are there any, as we think about, like, I just don't even answer my phone, so no one's going to get me that way.
yeah,
But as we think about maybe the email, that seems seemingly getting more and more sophisticated. Are there things from an average consumer perspective? I feel fairly protected at work. We're doing a lot of things. We test ourselves all the time. Part of pen testing has become, I get I get these crazy texts. It's like, hey, this is the CEO. Can you send me some gift cards? Right? They're just testing us,
yeah.
right, at that point. The first time I got that, it was really weird. I'm like, because my first thought was, why is he calling me on a holiday? Why is he asking me for gift cards? And then for a minute, I was like, well, I'm not doing this stuff. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is one of those automated, or this is one of those attacks, right? When we think about those, Christian, are there better tools? Do we have some things to help us with that? Especially in the world of email. Email is terrible. Like, it's awful.
It is, and there's a lot of easier sets of options that are now coming in with a lot of the managed email services. So even like Google Workspaces, like if you're using that to host your own domain and then email, they have a lot of nice features to make it easy to help customers turn on SPF and DKIM signing, which I highly recommend anyone validate that either they've turned that on or their mail provider is doing that for them, because what that does is actually prevents your email from being directly spoofed. So like if I wanted to try to spoof like Jim at theaverageguy.tv and those records weren't in place, I might actually be able to spoof your exact name and your exact email. Now, if you reply to that spoof, it's going to go to actual Jim, but I may have gotten you to do something by sending you something looking like I'm the real Jim.
Right.
So SPF and DKIM is a really just simple way to shut that down. But a lot of the Google Workspace tools are including things now that are commonly deployed in enterprises, right? So, one of the example kind of simple things that I think is really effective is having companies and or Google Workspace add the external badge to either email subject lines, or it's like a tag that will show up in the Gmail interface. And what that really does is it lets you know, as someone visually consuming that email message, that like, hey, this email is coming from external to your organization. Because now what a lot of people are doing is they're compromising some email or figuring out names and making very similar mailboxes where they'll still represent themselves as someone in your organization with the email that's clearly not from your organization, but it may look like, oh, he's deciding to use his personal Gmail today instead of his corporate address. And so that external badge really helps, because then you can train your employees to say basically, hey, when I see the external tag, I should at least have some cautioned or heightened alert that this message didn't come from within my organization, and that what I might be receiving in this message is not something I should act on, right? So, and then there's things that are more just common sense, right? I've seen a lot of local churches and parishes in the area be impacted by staff that didn't have these tools, were very easily convinced to do something on behalf of what they thought was someone else in their organization. And before you know it, they're changing bank account and routing number information to go to places it shouldn't. And again, kind of same concepts as like the MGM attack, for example. It is rumored that it took about 10 minutes on a phone call after the hacker group found the appropriate employee on LinkedIn, used that to create their persona, call in the help desk, and get the initial foothold. I mean, most of those tests that they're doing with phishing, they're a bit obvious. A lot of the ones that are out there are very sophisticated. They're gonna do a lot of research to make it super personalized when they're going after high value targets. And so, a common practice should be use these tools to basically, continue to receive emails from whoever you want to receive. But whenever someone is telling you to do an action over email, you should have some tools that either tell you that it's safe to act upon that, or, I don't have enough here to be confident. I'm going to just pick up the phone and call. And so, an example I give to a lot of the organizations I work with is like, if anyone's telling you to do anything with money, no matter how legit it does or doesn't look, because a lot of times it's not stuff about gift cards. It starts out as small, innocuous administrative stuff like, hey, you're overdue on this invoice, or, hey, we need to move the funds here for this purchase. And they know it's a real purchase coming up, right? That's your spidey sense to just say, okay, I'm going to pick up the phone. And if so-and-so really does want me to do this, they're not going to be angry or upset if I call to verify, right? So I think common sense goes a long way. But the tools are getting better in the email space. It's still amazing, though, how much we trust doing privileged actions or things based on an email, or even in some cases a phone conversation I wouldn't trust, right? Like, depending on what's involved in that negotiation, like, do it in person. And it's much harder to fool people in person. Not impossible, but helps avoid a lot of this. And I think it's an interesting statement in social psychology, how trusting we are of people and how trusting we want to be of people over the technology platforms
Yeah.
that we use.
Well, it's so complicated. Sometimes we go the oversimplified route of, okay, I'm just going to trust it because I don't want to think about it. It's just too much to think about. And then, or we don't do anything. I mean, I know folks, they won't and don't trust anything. I mean, I'm being really even careful. I mean, I do have an account that I send all the ads to, and there's sites I trust and I know, and I see their marketing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're not going to get spoofed, but I don't know for sure. And so that's probably one of those reminders, be a little more careful about, the deals that are coming in. I haven't seen a lot of those being spoofed. Oftentimes I get this one, hey, from Microsoft, air quotes. Someone's trying to change the phone number on your account, right? That's been one real common lately. And yeah, so it's a good reminder. We went through an era where we just opened up a bunch of email accounts because they were all free,
Yeah.
and I think I probably have 6 or 7. I'm down to 6 or 7, and changing from them is painful sometimes. We it's like I'm still I shouldn't admit this, but I'm still working on the cutover from LastPass to Bitwarden. There's just so much. There were like 600 things I had to literally, right? And I'm getting to the point now where I'm just getting ready to export it out of LastPass, close that account. I have all the important things moved over, but I had all these ancillary things. Now, the other thing is you could just always go back and say, well, I'll just reset the password if I need it. You could do that as well. So, yeah, it's super complicated, man. It's
No, it absolutely is. At least on the password storage front, Bitwarden has continued to be a game changer. It's been a great win this year in terms of technology improvement for the average guy. But when you talk about the free email services or any email service, one other suggestion that I have for folks that I don't know that I've actually ever talked about on our show before is email aliases are a damn powerful tool in your toolkit. And a lot of times what I'm doing now is I've set up a domain and I have all these different inbox aliases, so to speak. So like, let's say you have like orders at jimcollison.com, right? And you start putting orders at jimcollison.com and anything where like you're going to buy something. That's cool. But if your email gets like leaked or data breached or whatever, and then you start getting spam and all these other things, you can't really track like where did it come from because I've given this email out everywhere. So then you start doing what's called aliasing, which is you don't need to creating inboxes or aliases in the actual system. You can use the plus sign character, the period. Like you have to look at what your mail provider supports. But for example, I use a plus sign. So then it'll be like orders plus Best Buy at jimcollison.com. And that wasn't, I didn't have to set anything up on my mail server. I didn't have to add any new inboxes or any new aliases. But when all of a sudden I start getting weird stuff showing up in my inbox that I know I didn't sign up for, I didn't deal with, I know exactly where that email got leaked from. And I can basically zilch that entire email alias in my mail configuration to say never deliver anything that comes in over this again. And so increasingly I've moved to a system where I only am handing out aliases to people, and then I control and protect my underlying mailboxes because all the stuff that's auto consuming my address information is coming through an alias. And it doesn't look, I was never really a big fan of some of the like the temp email boxes or the weird aliasing services. They just were kind of cheap. But
that's a whole nother service you got to go check or
right,
switch over to or whatever, right?
right. But if you're on a commodity mail provider like Gmail, or if you're on your hosting your own domain, right? You point your domain to Google Mail services, and you can do kind of the same capabilities. So it is something that I have really taken to heart in the last few years, and it's helped tremendously manage my understanding of how my email is getting out there and how I can best filter and protect my information coming in.
Such a great way. That's such a great way to do that. I need to start doing that as well. By the way, jimcollison.com, I don't own it. So if you want to spam that as much as you can, this poor guy, and he's a real estate guy in
Sorry.
Oregon. I've been trying to get jimcollison.com forever. I thought at one point I even set one of those alerts to watch, see if the domain ever, but he's here he is right here.
You just have to make him an offer he can't refuse, Jim.
There he is. That's the other
Jim.
not the real JC.
Dun, dun, dun. Love it.
Isn't that crazy? He has no idea we're talking about him on this podcast right now, and I just showed his picture online. So he's a real estate guy. I'm sure he appreciates the out of Hillsboro, Oregon. I'm sure he appreciates the advertising. So anything else on that, Christian, before we switch?
No, I think that's a good wrap for email.
I think yeah, and a great suggestion. I think we'll wrap this on Christian's Corner. Now, if you had to be listening for a long time to know Christian's Corner, this was where we would let Christian just kind of go on a particular topic, oftentimes around Windows. I mean, I think that's funny. We spent some time, and we haven't talked about Windows in a long time, but you when we were talking about ideas of things to talk about on the show, you said, well, we could talk about Windows 11, and I knew if you wanted to talk about it, there was probably something we should know about it. And I've been listening to, I still listen to Windows Weekly, so I've been keeping up. I have 2 Windows 11 boxes here. I've actually got the one of the main machines. I moved over to Windows 11 because it has the TPM capabilities, and so I can do Windows 11 VMs as well. But talk a little bit about why did you bring that up? And as we think, because we're gonna support for Windows 10 ends in 2025. Now it's going to get extended a couple times. We know that, right? But eventually we got to move. What do you know that we don't know?
Well, so first I got really excited because I read something that after like 38 years of the MS Paint app, they finally decided to add layers and transparency. And I was like, if I'm reading a news article like this, what else is going on in Windows 11 that I've just filtered out of my life for the last 3 years? But I actually almost fell out of my chair when I read that. So that was an interesting enough investment that I'm like, okay, like what else is going on these days? And today, Microsoft announced that they are bringing Microsoft CoPilot as a new offering within Windows 11. And it works as an app, or kind of works as probably like a super sophisticated version of Clippy for your desktop. And what it's powered off of OpenAI DALL-E 3 model. And I think it's the next evolution of the kind of weird Cortana experience of Windows 10 era, which I was never about. I was like, get that stuff out of my operating system, disable all the things, block all the endpoints in pfSense. Like I never want to deal with it. But one of the things I discussed in the post show on last time Gadget Geeks was how I thought that operating systems had really not progressed in many respects at the speed that I would have hoped for the consumer. And, an example is like you think about File Explorer in Windows and how that's just probably, if you really stop and think about it, File Explorer is probably one of the most commonly used apps that there is in Windows. You probably use it, as much as you do your browser and don't even really think about it. But how much has File Explorer really evolved in the last 10 years? Like, yeah, Windows search has gotten better. Windows ability to index has gotten better. But like fundamentally, File Explorer has not changed a lick. And you would think that with all the evolution, especially in the AI, the NLP, the text analysis, the sentiment analysis, that, I'd be able to go to File Explorer and, search something like, show me pictures of my daughter's 16th birthday as the search term. And it would know how to pull that data back and show you those images. And not because you had to sit there doing data tagging and being a data scientist, but because no, like it's using AI, it's integrating it within the metadata, it's automatically generating the metadata, and it's indexing that. And Apple in some ways has gotten somewhat close in certain select areas. For example, if you own an iPhone or a Mac, it's very good at, you just throw photos at it, and once it knows who someone is once, man, it goes on a tear. And before you know it, if someone says, hey, can you get me photos for so-and-so for this event coming up, or maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's a graduation party, and you go on a Apple-based system and you can do that exercise in like 30 seconds. Windows, you still can't do that in 30 seconds, by the way. So I thought to myself, gee, like Copilot, is it maybe, it's a, like all things Microsoft, it's a double-edged sword. I'm excited that they're finally bringing AI to the client and the consumer. I'm sad that I really think this is moving Windows 11 towards the kind of what I call the cloud portal to Microsoft Azure. I really see it as we're hitting that full cycle again, where everything used to be on the mainframe, then everyone had to have their personal computing revolution, and now everything's swinging back. But we're finding a lot of these AI models, once they're like well trained and understood and tested, you can run much smaller versions of the model with much less compute and get 90% of the bang for your buck. And we've seen this in DEF CON, for example. A gentleman did a demonstration of video transcription, which, as you know, like you upload a podcast or whatnot, and you're paying some premium service, you're uploading the file, you're giving the data to them. It's pretty accurate. It gets it wrong sometime, etc. But like, okay, but this guy is running a 256 kilobyte binary that has the limited trained data model based on OpenAI spec. You can go and download it yourself. And it does video transcription locally without an internet connection. Like he pulled his internet, he disabled it, proved it as part of his demo, and it's rock solid. Like it gets it right. And I'm like, damn, if we can compile that into less of a megabyte executable, why aren't we pushing this stuff in native libraries and making these operating systems, really get to the next level? And of course, the corporate interest is a big answer in all of that, right? Like they want you to be interactive with their cloud. They want you to have to upload your data to those environments so that they can make their products better. They want you to be buying into the subscription ecosystem. So, we say, oh, well, Windows is basically free these days. And like, yeah, your entry into the operating system is free, and that's about it. And it's like Spirit Airlines, they'll let you cross the threshold into the airplane for about $60, and then about another $240 later they might think about letting you off that airplane too. So I'm excited by some of the announcements. There's no way in hell that I'm getting off of Windows 10 until I go kicking and screaming. It'll be much the way I went straight from Windows 7 to Windows 10 on my main workstation. It looks like I'm set up to be kicking and screaming all the way to the Windows 10 end of life. I shed several tears when Windows Server 2012 R2 is, rest in peace. It's got about a week to go before it hits its end of life for security patching. And so we're starting to hit that turning point, and my rant is to say I feel mixed feelings about these announcements, and it's certainly not at a place yet where it appeals to me by any point, or any stretch of the imagination. But I find it interesting that they are actually starting to focus on features again, which feels good. For a while, I was like, why do I need to use Windows 11? Like, what does it do for me? Like, oh, you got frame rates faster on DirectX, whatever number Windows 11 on is, like, great, like, good for you guys. But like, it fundamentally to me didn't seem like anything more than Microsoft's grab to the next thing to move you towards their subscriptions and their cloud services. So we'll see what happens with this CoPilot. They keep, tinkering around. Like, it still amazes me that we're in Windows 11 and you have the classic control panel that, goes all the way back to Windows XP. You can still get to it. And there's still things that are not in the native new UI that you can only get to going through that old control panel. Now, a dinosaur in my brain that like gloms onto that thing absolutely loves that. But it's just, it's really weird to me how much of those big discongruities there are in the OS. And
well, listen, we have tabbed File Explorer now, right? But we don't have edit in a right click. You got to go right click, show more options. Then it brings up the Windows 10 dialog box where you can click edit. Now I'm sure that's going to change. And at some point, we're going to listen. Windows 11 is going to be 12 here before we know it. CoPilot will probably change. The full rollout of that will probably be Windows 12. Just to be transparent, I don't think there's much life for 11. It's a weird number to begin with. It's it's odd. It's 11. Like nobody wants to be.
Well, they skipped 9, so it didn't help.
Yeah, nobody wants to be odd, right? From that regard. So yeah, I mean, as I'm looking at it right now, I was like, oh yeah, it's got tabbed File Explorer. That's pretty. Now they didn't fix anything about File Explorer. It's still the clunky, slow, like it literally is the same code that it has been since probably Windows 7, right? I just don't know if they've made that many changes. But yeah, you got to right click, show more options, edit. If I want to edit a batch file, right click, show more options, edit. Are you kidding me? Like, now, is it that big of a deal to do one more click? No, but is it that clunky? Yeah, it's pretty clunky. So it's now, is it for me? Does it change my mind about upgrading to Windows 11? No, I'm going to go to it because it's the next thing. I'll go to 12 when that comes up. I've got it on a limited, like I said, I think I have it on 3 computers now. Everything else is running 10. I'll run those till I absolutely can't run them anymore. Which I don't think is. I think we're probably still. We have 2 years till advertised support, and then the Windows 7 model was 3 years beyond that. So, you're like, oh, okay, so we still have 5 probably. So, yeah, I kind of interesting. I think, Christian, some of the interesting stuff too is there's some rumors that Windows 12 and ARM will be a better implementation. They've been working behind the scenes to make that a better experience. And what are your thoughts on cutting Intel out and going ARM from an operating system standpoint, knowing we're doing more things in the cloud?
I think Intel's been in a kind of precarious position in my mind over the last year. It's clear that AMD ate a little bit into their consumer retail side. It's very clear that ARM is a growing market share both in the enterprise and in small fab computing. And so I think Intel really was the giant in the room for such a long time that the diversification you're seeing in chip manufacturing is pretty stunning. And you're already seeing ARM on a variety of platforms. I think it's a natural choice to see Windows come to ARM. And so that wouldn't surprise me really in the least bit. And I think traditionally you think about ARM and you're thinking about phones and or iPads and handheld stuff as this is really coming a long way. But now you're starting to see that even in the desktop and server environments, ARM is starting to have an answer at a much cheaper price point. So I personally think that the more diversification there is in the chip manufacturing process, the better technology we're going to get at better prices. So I think they're doing amazing work. It remains to be seen. I've felt this way in the past where AMD has come out with something great, but then Intel kind of let them do that a little bit until they came back and crushed them, and resoundingly. But in many ways, I thought they were going to do that after Ryzen. Like AMD had a big win with Ryzen, and I thought, gee, Intel's just holding back their next crushing blow, and it really was more of a soft whimper, which was really the first time I thought, like maybe the Intel giant has found its peak finally. And I think as you see ARM, and also as you see what we're doing with the AI chips and building chips specifically focused on AI computing, I think ARM has a huge opportunity there. If you look at what the cloud companies are doing and building their own chips and customizing them to the types of workloads that run, I think the days of x86 64 Intel being the dominant platform, their market share is gonna take a long time where they're an equal player. But I definitely think that these kind of alternative brands are going to grow and eat quite a bit of market share, especially driven by the fact that with AI, people are looking at how do we stand out as unique. And I think what chips and what hardware the algorithms run on is a big area where people are going to try to distinguish themselves. And so absolutely having something that's not a Intel or NVIDIA answer is going to be something that a lot of people try to make a play for.
Yeah. That's good thoughts. I mean, you talk about the diversification on the chipset side, and of course you have Apple doing it's completely its own thing in a lot of ways. And then you just mentioned NVIDIA, and they're kind of in a place. They have a little bit of money. They're doing some interesting things. I think they're part of this AI equation in a lot of ways, right? They're powering a lot of AI. So and even Intel trying to come out with a GPU is an interesting move in some regards, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some, what will we be talking about from an OS standpoint? And does ARM change things from a security posture? Certainly you and I have talked about Intel's problems in the past, right? From a security standpoint, does ARM change that at all? Does it reduce the attack surface if we begin to go that direction from a device's perspective? Are we going to get to a spot where really our phones just power, like we've been talking about this for a long time. Microsoft was there a while ago, didn't work. Maybe it'll take some more time, but our phones power our desktop experience for the most part, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if folks are really successful in um, making desktops less and less prevalent for the average guy, ARM chips being the kind of primary compute on the mobile platforms will play all a bigger role as they continue to get faster and faster,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
interact with AI both on and off platform.
Yeah, and what does it mean when AI data sets begin to become localized again? Because we know that's going to happen, right? We know, right, today they're in the cloud or they're somewhere else. We know there's going to be situations where those are going to get pushed farther to the edge to be
Yes.
used, right?
Uh, yeah, I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Really, I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is that? Because we always think, oh, processing power at the local level is not going to be needed anymore. Well, maybe not this cycle, but when it
Mhm.
cycles back around and we need to get some of that processing power back to the edge, and there's an advantage to it, that always drives it, right? When there's an advantage to the end user to have that power on the edge and to be able to do things with it, okay, well, that becomes a little bit of a different. I mean, game streaming has changed what they've done to get good at game streaming, has certainly changed the way we look at remote desktop or remote computing in that way, right? But that doesn't mean it's always best to have all the computing power centralized and not have it on the edge. You think about cars,
Yep.
like, and planes.
And planes.
You want the computing power on the edge, right? You
Yeah, and
know?
you have to be able to run it in environments where you're not always going to have a persistent connection.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to say the least. Tony, couple comments. Joe says the some of the changes in Windows have driven him to use keyboard shortcuts because the mouse experience has gotten kind of jankety in
Strange.
Windows
Yeah.
11. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little less. I'm like, I think I'm pretty intuitive with this stuff, and I'm kind of like, okay, where did that go? Like, where did they move that thing to? Now, search for those things has never been better, right? You can easily go down and search for it, type it in, and find it pretty easily. But there's a lot of changes going on. Tony said worked part time in the mountains recently. They didn't have my dictation account set up. I used dictation from Windows, copied and pasted it to the EMR, adapt and overcome. Yeah, you can do that. You certainly can do that as well. Um, he goes on to say they're switching to a new electronic record, so it's not a lot of effort to troubleshoot the old one. And boy, it's old. Looks like Windows 2000 or 2000 Mac software. And yeah, well, there's some I think there's some pretty sizable changes coming on the Windows side, and they're doing some things depending on who you are. You like it or you hate it, just like everything else,
Yeah.
from that perspective. But I think there's some changes. Um, Panos went to Amazon. What's up with that? You guys, did you know that Panos? Had you heard that?
I didn't, so that
Okay.
tells you what I know.
I think it just came out today, so I think it's brand new. But Panos apparently wasn't happy with some of the cutbacks on Surface. I think eventually Microsoft's going to abandon Surface, but so maybe he saw the writing on the wall. So he's hanging out over
Yeah.
there. So looks like
Good
he's
for
hanging out on
Panos.
Amazon. Yeah, good for him. Good for him. Gets swallowed up by the giant. Well, Christian, we did it. We got through it once again. Anything you're looking ahead on that is that you haven't you haven't put all the stuff together yet, but that you're keeping an eye on ahead?
Generally speaking, in a topic
Yeah.
area,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, just generally,
um,
like, what are you keeping your eye on that's going on?
I'm watching to see if um, OpenAI continues to lose or gain market share. And I think because that is the default thing everyone gravitated towards, it'll be really interesting to watch now the bifurcation of what I call the spin-off technologies of that. So I am watching that pretty closely. I'm also watching how they're evolving what they offer in their free version from their premium version, and understanding like those distinctions and those differences. I think that's really important. And I'm also starting to look more seriously at how are we in the computing industry going to deal with the hallucination problem? Because when you look at what's going on with AI, there's some areas where you really don't have to worry about hallucination. So if you're having the AI write code from known open source libraries, like I never just outright trust the code, but I can independently verify it very quickly, and it can save hours of time, especially if you're trying to learn something new by only reading documentation as a human versus studying examples that are working backwards from questions. It's incredibly effective. But one of the challenges that AI is going to have to overcome in the next couple of years to really move to the next level is handling the hallucination problem. And for those not familiar with that terminology, it really is just a fancy way of saying that AI seems to be very good at making stuff up. And it does it more so in some areas than others. A good example of this is in the legal community. There have been all sorts of wild stories you can go read or hear about where lawyers have been submitting documents to the court, and instead of writing their legal briefs, they have the AI write it. It's almost like classic school plagiarism, right? Like, and then when I was going through school, they had launched a service called turnitin.com to catch the cheaters, right? It's like we're doing this in our legal system now, but with OpenAI writing the legal briefs.
Right.
And so it's been a big problem. But one of the reasons it's been so easy to catch is that the AI was making up entire legal theories based on case law that didn't exist or precedents that didn't exist, and extrapolating in a way that would never make sense in a legal argument. And this applies to many other areas. The legal example is a good one, though, because it shows how in that topic area it is much the AI is much more vulnerable to inaccuracy than in other areas. And so I think this is a matter of when, not if, but it's an open question to me how we're going to go about solving that problem while also dealing with the traditional concerns around how do you bias or not bias training algorithms and making the AI reflect certain personas or certain viewpoints. And that is a problem, but the hallucination problem is almost a subset or an add-on problem that I think is going to need to make much more progress in the next couple of years before it reaches the next level of trust by the end user. And currently, there aren't any, silver bullet strategies out there that address this problem. So I'm watching to see early movers in this space that say they're starting to tackle that problem head on. And I think that'll be a good indicator that we're moving past just the concept of generative AI into generative AI that has high degrees of accuracy.
Yeah, I think the development of AI is following human development in a lot of ways, and that we began with just put stuff in, get stuff out. It's a baby. Put food in, you get poop out, right? Whatever, right? It just it responds to don't stop, don't direct commands. We may be in this early childhood phase where it's starting to learn to talk. It's starting to make things like it's starting to put concepts together. It has ideas, but when it gets lost, it's smart enough just to start making things up or to try to say, well, I know this. I'll try to make that like this, even though that's experience would say that's horribly wrong, right? Don't do those kinds of things. And I still think it doesn't because the human experience is pain, and that we learn from that. It's a response back, right? And it's not all learning's not pain based, but some of it is, and, that's not built in any way. It has no good. I think we're struggling with the feedback. Like what's good feedback. I also wonder if having humans teach it is the right thing, right? I mean, we wonder why the software is flawed because we're training it and we're horribly flawed, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so we're expecting this perfect, like, oh, this should be perfect. Well, wait a minute. Who trained it on this horribly complex problem that we're working on? Are you perfect? Like, do so anyways, I think we're at this 7 or 8 year old kind of thing. And maybe the next phase is an angry teenager. Watch out.
Yeah. Watch out.
Watch out when we have AI acting like an angry, entitled, disrespectful, moody teenager.
I love it. I love it.
Not you, of
You and
course.
I will
You
both
never
be
know.
making tinfoil hats at that point.
Oh, it's listen, there's some things it's really good at. It's just a word calculator right now. I mean, it's just really good. There are some areas of where it can be super helpful, especially in the areas of like translations, it compiling things, having some basic ideas around stuff, getting like, hey, give me a list of, I want to make nachos, but I don't want regular nachos. Give me 4 different nacho recipes. And man, it will just crank that,
Yeah.
It's really good at that. So it'll be interesting to see what CoPilot, just to bring this back around. Like, I'm really interested, like, what's that really going to do for the average consumer? Listen, the CoPilot they use in Visual Studio writes code.
Right.
What are we like? Is the average consumer in Windows really ready for? Not that we're going to expect it to write code. I don't think that's what it's going to do, but I don't know. I'm just super skeptical. I think they're trying to put CoPilot in everything. Like,
Yes.
like, here's a mouse with CoPilot. You're like, I don't need CoPilot in the mouse, So I don't know.
You'll find out when you do. It'll tell you why you need it in the mouse, Jim.
Oh my God. You're just like, you're like, I don't know. Maybe they'll have CoPilot enabled monitors, since John's hanging out there. CoPilot enabled monitors where it'll tune itself to the color thing and
It's just gonna help you move your mouse cursor to the buttons you really need to be clicking, Jim, and you don't know what those buttons are.
It'll have shock response. It's like, no, go that way. No. No, it'll just say move. That's what it'll do. It'll sit there, move, and then it'll just start moving the mouse for you so you can have it do its thing. Well, anyways, good conversation, Christian. Always great to have you on. Can you hang out for 1 second as I close this thing up?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Couple reminders on the way out. We do this every show, but of course, the averageguy.tv, and we made it all the way through a show without talking about Maple Grove Partners. So we'll throw it in here. If you need reliable high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust, of course, that's Christian. Check out maplegrovepartners.com. Plans still starting at $10. Is that
$10?
$10 a thing? And Christian can do just about anything. So check it out. If you need something, give him a call. Or check it out on maplegrovepartners.com. If you want to send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv. You can join the Discord group, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. You can leave a message if you're looking for just an easy way, 30-second message. You can call it in and leave a question or whatever, a comment. Go out to homegadgetgeeks.com. There's a little voice button down on the bottom right-hand corner, a little microphone. Click it and leave me a message. Love to hear from you on that as well. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. I got a couple shows lined up. I know Bob and Ryan are coming back here pretty quick. Let me bring that up really fast I've been keeping track of shows since show 100, and we're at 585. So it takes me a while to get there. Christians this week, I actually have an opening next week. I may be calling, if you're listening to this, Jay, I may be calling to fill in for next week. Bob and Ryan the week after that. Dave McCabe is checking in after that. So we got some shows coming up. We'd love to have you out here and to join us live. Big thanks, Katie J, Brian, John, Tony. I saw Ken out there a little bit earlier. Joe was out there. Thank you guys for coming out in the chat room. Appreciate you guys. And we'll do it again, I think, next Thursday. Thanks for coming out, everybody. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody. Oh, good work, Christian.
Yeah, good deal. Good show.
Not bad from 3 points.
You know me, Jim. It's I don't
Oh
I
no, it's awesome.
don't need
It's
the
awesome.
I don't need the details. I
I
just
love
need
the
to.
watch. I love the watch gadget.
Yeah, we have post show gadgets if people really want to see them. But
Yeah. Thanks, KDJ. Appreciate that. Brian says, excellent show. John liked it as well. It was a good show. I enjoyed it. I check out that watch. That's kind of a cool. It's not really a watch, but yeah, good stuff. Super. Any post show questions while I got Christian? You guys out in chat, we'll give it a second to see if you guys have any. Tony says, doctor called me the other day with a 402 number. That's Nebraska. So he must have been somewhere here. It's a big state. So, and I think at least half the state's 402. So it used to be the whole state, and then they cut
you
it
guys
over.
gotten any new zip codes lately, or
No, we haven't. That'd be an interesting question for one of the AIs. You know,
am I going to get a new zip code?
show me the growth rate of Nebraska. You know, Iowa, Nebraska, Omaha Metro, whatever. It feels like, I mean, we have built a ton of apartments in the last 3, 4, 5 years. And homes are going in too. So there is growth. Sarpy County, where I live, used to be a sleepy little county with, there's Bellevue on this end where I live, and then nothing out west. They built a ballpark out there. Amazon put a big distribution center in out there. A big mall out there. So not a mall, but like some shopping stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so the tax base of the county is doing better. Certainly, it's they built a new jail, so it feels like it's growing. But then again, I don't. But although where I'm at in life, I don't know if I'm worried or care about that anymore, like I did maybe when I was younger or something. I don't know. Yeah, Joe says, I don't know how people buy houses these days. Yeah, I mean, housing prices have gone up a lot in Nebraska. I know, Christian. Good thing you got in when you did.
Yeah, that was huge.
Yeah, it's and rates. I mean, we're in this weird bubble. You know, I was watching. I don't know why, but I was watching The Big Short again the other night, which is a great movie, by the way.
That's amazing. Yeah.
It is a great movie. That and Margin Call. I was watching those, and those are both about the 2009, implosion. And it's a miracle we survived that financial crisis, just to be honest. Although, anyways, and I keep thinking, I wonder what the next, like, we're no pun intended, but we're prime for another, right? Like another, no, I guess pun intended. Something, right? I mean, that was 07, 08, 09. We're kind of in that spot. Student loans start back up. I've been kind of wondering how that's gonna, like, what that's gonna do. Everybody's been so used to having just money in the economy. All the government stuff has, in the U.S., all the incentives have stopped. And now student loans start. Maybe a little bit of Judgment Day. You know?
Mm-hmm.
It'll take a while, but it'll be interesting to see. Just again, watching those programs and watching the things that go on, and you're like, I wonder what kind of shenanigans are going on right now that we don't
plenty
that we don't know about,
that we don't know about,
or that we do know about. You know? Yeah. And Brian says rental prices are super high too. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough time. This kind of reminds me a little bit of the 70s. the feeling people had when prices got crazy, and everybody was just kind of like, this is terrible. So I don't know. I think 2024 will be an interesting year, to say the least. So yeah, Brian says, and speaking of Judgment Day,
AI.
so good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of AI at all, and maybe I should be, but I just don't. It's so dumb. You talked about those hallucination. Is that what they call it? Hallucination.
Hallucinations. Yeah.
And I'm kind of going, oh my god, this thing is so dumb. Like, I've been trying to use it for podcast notes and some of those kinds of things, and I'm like, I mean, there are some areas where it's really smart, but
it's all just math, Jim. It's all
maybe
just math.
maybe the user is the problem at this point. So, all right, well, gents, if you're we went a little longer than we normally do, so I'm going to let you guys go. But thanks for coming out tonight. Since there's no questions, well, Joe, he says Musk did announce the first human Neuralink trial is coming up. He may be one guy that actually can get some of that kind of stuff done.
Oh, probably. If he doesn't go completely mental before then, but yeah. Yeah.
Just his head explodes.
He's on the spectrum of intriguing. Who knows?
$1 million. He's like the evil. He's like the evil villain in some movies. John says, time for sleep here. John, you're retired. You can sleep in tomorrow. Seriously, dude. I mean, I have to work tomorrow. Come on. No, we'll wrap it up. Guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming out. Take care.
Take it easy.